All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get underway. This is the public meeting of the Park Harrisburg Parking Advisory Committee. I'd like to bring the meeting to order. First, I'd like the members to announce themselves and their names. Nancy and John, why don't you go ahead and start off?
I'm John Kemp with SP Plus.
Hello, I'm Nancy Kine with SP Plus.
Good evening, Jeff Durrell with Assured Guarantee.
Elizabeth Christian with the Department of General Services.
Bob Camper with SP Plus.
I'm John Gass with Traumont Real Estate Advisors.
David Black, Harrisburg Regional Chamber and Creek.
Wanda Williams with City of Harrisburg.
Rich Scott, City of Harrisburg.
And I'm Neil Grover, pinch hitting for Bruce Weber for the City of Harrisburg.
First matter I will bring up is there were some recent press questions about transparency. I would like to bring to everyone's attention the fact that we do have on the Park Harrisburg website a link in the FAQ section to all of the required reporting that we present to PEDMA, our client, and that's posted on a centralized website. There's also a contact tab on that website where anyone can pose a question to members of both SP Plus and Traumont. So we promote that anyone who has questions or is looking for information, please use those resources. To start off the presentation tonight, I'd like to have SP Plus talk about some of the 2018 accomplishments that we had.
Thank you, Mr. Gass. We'll start with Park Mobile. For the last 6 months, Park Mobile transactions represent 28 to 34% of all on-street transactions. This is a marked increase from earlier ranges in the neighborhood of 10%, meaning that the public is finding more convenient choices. And then Park Harrisburg has partnered with their largest client, the Commonwealth of PA, to install electric car chargers for their fleet. Phase 1 was completed at the end of 2017, adding 8 car chargers in the 5th Street garage. And then Phase 2 has now been completed at the beginning of this year to add 4 additional car chargers. And as always, Park Harrisburg continues to support the City of Harrisburg through event parking rate for visitors attending festivals and parades. And Park Harrisburg continues to support organizations providing parking for events in the city when parking is available.
Thank you. And then also in 2018, we were able to resolve some differences on the transaction documents, and that enabled us to begin the advisory committee meetings again. So we are having, as scheduled, 2 meetings per year. This is the first, of course, and then we'll have the second meeting in the November-December timeframe. On the project financial report, which at the back of the room with the agenda, we have certain financial information for the project. I'll just run through a couple of the points on those particular reports. Where for 2018, we feel like we had a very good year with some reduction or lesser than budget numbers for transient enforcement. But we feel like the transient is just trending downward at this point. It is not really a lower demand type of usage, but just a result of possibly some higher demand in previous years. Also, enforcement is basically a function of the routes that our officers walk. So it looks like last year in 2018 that people were just getting less tickets during that time frame, which is the explanation there. That was lower revenue was offset partially by lower expenses. We were able to pay a substantial amount of subordinated expenses last year due to release of cash flow that was tied up with the resolution of the ambiguity. And very importantly, we were able to deposit about $1 million into our capital reserve, which was actually the first funding for that capital reserve from cash flow since we closed the transaction in 2014. So we viewed that as very important. Capital improvements, as we look at the garages that we have, we all recognize that some of these garages are older and require a lot of improvement over time. We focused in 2018 on concrete projects both at the Locust Street Garage and at the Chestnut Street Garage. I feel like we came away with some good improvements there that were both useful and also under budget. 2019, there is a project budget that's provided. We don't expect to have quite the good year in 2019 that we did in 2018. Part of this is due to higher expenses overall. As you look at the bottom of that particular budget, you can see we're expecting a negative surplus cash flow of $760,000. That essentially will flow back up into the subordinated expenses and mean that there will probably be no payment fees paid, no performance fees paid, and possibly a slightly less than scheduled amount paid to the city and Harrisburg Parking Authority. But we will look to continue good results for the project. At this point through April, we are on budget for revenues. We are under budget for expenses, so we hope to continue that year in 2019. Additional improvements in 2019 are going to include a retrofit of the Walnut elevators, and then also continuing concrete work at the Chestnut Street Garage, which if you park there now, you can see that there's a substantial amount of work going on with underpinning and concrete work on the top floors of that garage. So those are the 2019 objectives. I'd like to ask at this time if there are any additional comments by the committee members. Hearing none, I'll move on to see if there are any comments from the public. And I'll ask you to speak up. Our mic is not working well, so if you don't mind, just speak up and we will do without the mic. So please come up if you have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Michael Hertrick. I'm a transplant to Harrisburg. I just moved here full-time 3.5 weeks ago. My husband has been here for a year. And I have owned and operated a business in the south side of Pittsburgh for 30 years. And I'm looking to open a business in the city of Harrisburg. And I'd like for somebody to explain to me why on earth I would ever consider opening a business in a city that does not promote small business. Because right now, it is completely stifled by your parking system. Let me give you your two biggest examples. I sat on the chamber board in the south side of Pittsburgh in my 25 years of owning, 30 years of owning the business. And I've done studies on parking all around the country. And I understand, I've done a little research, and I understand that your situation was that you were in bankruptcy and you needed to make money from the parking and it was outsourced. And that's not a problem. And I also don't have a problem with blanket metering and permit parking in the entire city. But I've done studies in other cities because that was my job as part of the chamber on the south side of Pittsburgh. I have never, ever seen a neighborhood permit parking in which there isn't a time, usually a 1 to 2 hour time reference of free parking before you start to be metered. The reason for that is you want people to come into this city, because if people come into this city, it's going to bolster your bottom dollar, not just through parking, but through added business from businesses, growth of business. Your housing is up in this city. You're up at about 20% right now. But walk along your main streets, walk along your 2nd Street corridor and your 3rd Street corridor. By the way, that's right around one of your properties, but no one ever got back to me. And you're losing businesses. So I've surveyed the businesses, and the reason you're losing businesses is because people can't park. If you would allow a 1 to 2 allowance in neighborhoods, those corridors in particular, you bolster people coming into the city. So your solution, short-term solution, give free parking from 5 to 7 p.m. 5 to 7 p.m. free parking allows people from your surrounding areas to come into the city, eat at the restaurants, and leave. Does nothing for your daytime business. Absolutely nothing. okay? Nothing wrong with metered parking. We did it in the south side of Pittsburgh, blanketed the entire area. Also blanketed permit parking the entire area. But you have to give an allowance for people coming into the city, workers working on people's homes, people that need to do something for neighbors. This can't happen right now. So now you're going to start seeing, I'm going to venture to guess, you're going to start to see people moving back out of the city because they can't get services to come to their homes. Now, you do have a process of, I can get a guest permit, okay? In the city of Pittsburgh and other cities. In the beginning of the year, when we are given our permits, when we pay for our permits, most cities offer the option to the residents to purchase a guest permit. It's a one-time yearly fee. They're given a cardboard permit to put on their guest windshield. You don't do that here. You have a two-part process. You have to go down to the city, go into one building, apply for the permit, go to another building, pay for the permit, and then it's only good for 3 days. I don't think there are very many people that are going to do that in the city of Harrisburg. Instead of making all of your money up front, cost can be $20 for the year, $30 for the year, to give each resident a guest permit. Very, very simple thing. I've talked to the neighbors here, I've talked to the homeowners here. It seems to me, and I don't like to point fingers, but whoever negotiated this deal, the people who own the parking really were on the good side of that deal. Because there's money to be made for everyone, but in order to grow this city, you're going to have to get more people coming down here to shop on a daily basis. Right now, you're in jeopardy of losing the True Value hardware store. I've been talking to her over the last several months. Her sales are going down dramatically. There's simply nowhere for people to park or to pull up for 15 minutes. I mean, your parking, if you go along, I'm sure if any of you have driven here to this meeting tonight, you probably rode around in the block 3 or 4 times looking for a parking space, because from 5 to 7 parking is for free. And you know, I understand when you let people park for free, they don't want to pay for parking. But the 1 to 2 hour allowance for people parking on the streets that are permit parking just makes good sense. People come into the city, they stay longer, then they then have to move their cars, go into permitted spaces. Pittsburgh didn't want to do it because they thought it would hurt, but it didn't. Their parking just grows just by numbers and numbers every year. They get more and more revenue off of the parking. Because the idea is to get people into the city, okay? And for the people living in the city to be comfortable enough to have people, to invite people into the city, because all of those people come and use the facilities and spend money, raising the revenues for everyone. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I have a couple of different comments. First, I want to say I am actually thankful for Park Harrisburg a little bit, because I think a lot of the neighborhoods have been cleaned up in terms of park supplies. It's nice to have enforcement at intersections. I appreciate the triangle in the corner. You know, as a pedestrian in the neighborhood, it's nice to be able to cross at crosswalks now. Before that was not the case. There's other things that have been helpful with the parking management system. I do think there's room for more enforcement, actually, because you know, I'm a bus rider often, and bus stops are still parked up. There are issues sometimes when you know, I go to have deliveries made to my house. It's really hard to create a space, and I've tried going through the permit process to clear up a block, and there's not enforcement when you pay the extra $1 in order to have that space blocked up. So I guess I would say there's room for more enforcement in order to help people who aren't necessarily parking all day for alternatives, for bus stops, for deliveries, for stuff like that. But big caveat there is one of the issues I've run into with parking system here is the signage isn't very clear. There are many blocks where you're not really sure where the handicap spaces start or end. You're not really sure where the bus stop spaces start or end. And I feel like it's important for a parking management company to also kind of, own and enforce those signages so it's clear what the rules are. So that's just a comment there. I appreciate that as a company system. Also, speaking to the permitting process and its guests, it would be nice if that process for getting a permit or guest pass were more clear on both the city's website and the Park Harrisburg website, especially for visitors coming to the city. It's very confusing. The day I moved here, I got a parking ticket. So it's pretty much inevitable because it's impossible to figure out how to not get a parking ticket if you're moving there. So that's frustrating. And then also another issue is I often get work rental vehicles, and there's no way to park in front of my house because you have to go get a guest permit and register the license plate. So I get a rental vehicle from work, and I'm forced to park blocks away from my house, which is really frustrating because there's just no process for dealing with cars that are changing license plates. I think that's all I have for comments on that.
Thank you. Additional questions?
I have one other comment, and I was husband. First, let me kind of add to the whole part about the guest permit. I will say when Pittsburgh moved to the electronic parking meter things like you have now, where you just pay money in the meter and the meter person can kind of scan your thing and they know. They also moved to electronic guest permits. So when a guest comes, you go online and you say, here's my guest, here's the license plate number, here's how long they'll be there. And I think you're allowed up to 3 days or something like that. And that way they're also able to track that you're not like registering the same car over and over and over time. But it saves a lot of paperwork and a lot of running down to the city. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, we got 2 tickets in our first 12 hours here in the city. And we got tickets while we were down here trying to get our parking permit. So, naturally, of course, the judge eventually did dismiss it. She was like, oh, I understand what was going on, blah, 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 because you need proof of residence, you had to have our closing first. My concern, however, was that when you get a ticket, there's no way to plead guilty. Or, I'm sorry, there's no way to plead not guilty. Your option is pay the ticket or ignore it. If you ignore it, they attach fines and late fees. So then when you do eventually get the option to plead not guilty, you're now pleading not guilty to a $120 offense instead of a $30 offense. And if you are then found guilty, you're paying $120 instead of $30. Can we please make a mechanism on the ticket that right when you have a $30 ticket, you can immediately plead not guilty and begin that appeal process? Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? So if there are no additional questions, I believe that finishes our agenda for tonight. Thank everyone for coming, and we'll be back in about 6 months. Thank you.